By King Edward VIII at the opening of Parliament 3rd November 1936. The policy of my government continues to be based upon membership of the League of Nations. They desire to see the League strengthened for its work in the Pacific settlement of international disputes. The League is in session. Today's events have international importance. The BBC observer at Geneva rings up Broadcasting House. He gives them details on which they plan his evening broadcast. The BBC calls Post Office headquarters. Headquarters inform the international exchange.
Hello, yes. Now, the BBC want to broadcast from Geneva directly after the second news bulletin. Yes. We will use the Geneva Lions Paris Underground Circuit extended to London. Yes, all right, I'll phone Paris and ask them to arrange accordingly.
The success of this broadcast depends on the Post Office. Spread out across Europe is a network of Post Office landlines. The broadcast will be relayed through this landline to the BBC for transmission. One after another, 6 control stations connect the sections of the line until the circuit between the League and the BBC is complete. Downstairs, the engineers are instructed to prepare the circuit.
Paris music circuits? Yes.
Music lines give the best reproduction.
All right. Warning Canterbury immediately. Hello, Canterbury. Prepare the Paris music circuit for a League broadcast tonight.
Canterbury informs the next control station, Boulogne, to make a similar connection. Boulogne to Paris. Paris to Lyon. Lyon to Geneva. Geneva telephone exchange to the Palace of the Nations. The observer can now broadcast through the BBC, London. The BBC telephones the League studio to stand by.
That is the end of the second news bulletin. We are now taking you over to Geneva for a talk from our observer.
The observer looks for his signal to go.
Of all the ideas for reforming the League put forward either in writing or by word of mouth to the Assembly, there have been 2 concrete ones, and they've been put forward by Great Britain.
Behind this broadcast is the story of an ancient city and a new political ideal. Geneva was the haughtiest city of Switzerland, itself the most nationally aloof of European countries. Yet, because of its steadfast neutrality, it has become the main base of international discussion. After the war fever of 1914 to 1918, followed a drive for peace. The forces of cooperation organized themselves.
In 1919, the International Labour Organization began work. A draft covenant was adopted by 42 states. On the 15th of November 1920, the first assembly of the League of Nations was held in Geneva.
All smaller projects were merged in a larger and more ambitious scheme. President Wilson's League of Nations.
Here is one of the English delegates on the steps of the old electoral building, which is still used for conferences. Monsieur Léon Blum, the French Prime Minister.
Geneva was to become the clearinghouse for the agreements and disagreements of the world.
In 1929, the first stone was laid of a new Palace of the Nations, now nearly complete. A committee of 5 architects, 3 French, 1 Hungarian and 1 Italian, was selected by the international competition to design it. Workers of 10 nationalities are cooperating happily in its construction. The Secretariat is already in occupation of the wing allotted to it.
Palais des Nations. Allô? Allô? Vous désirez Monsieur Stoppani, au Comité économique?
The League has to try to eliminate economic anarchy from the world, as well as political anarchy. At this moment, the League's Economic Committee is considering the world economic situation. It is dealing with all sorts of practical questions, such as
the effect of economic nationalism on most favored nation clause in treaties, clearing agreements and exchange control, existing patent rights obstructing standardization of anti-streptococcic serum, customs tariffs and export restriction.
In the palace is a special post office where as many as 20 bags of mail come in and go out every day. The League has branch offices and correspondence all over the world. Communiques and pamphlets are always being sent out. Reports are always arriving.
19, 20, c'est fini.
Members' contributions are fixed by the Assembly in gold francs, according to an estimate of their ability to pay. Mr. Seymour Jacklin, Treasurer, receives the money.
Have you the file on the Swiss government's contribution? I see they have paid for this year.
They have paid as usual at the beginning of the year, the sum of 489,000 francs.
Thank you.
If the League is to fulfill its object, it must get the people of all nations thinking internationally. Its deliberations must be open. It needs publicity.
111 journalists of 35 nations are permanently accredited to the League. In 1932, for the Disarmament Conference, 600 press cards were issued. A large room and a row of telephone booths are set aside for the press.
At the League of Nations this afternoon, when Mr. Anthony Eden rose from his seat. 1 minute, please. Will you take this instead? Thank you.
Mr. F.P. Walters, one of the Under-Secretaries General of the League, from time to time directs vital documents to be broadcast. The League has part control of the Radio Suisse station at Prangin, known as Radio Nations. In times of emergency, the control is complete.
Ici Prangin.
I want to consult you about these letters which we have received from governments about the reform of the League. We have about 20 of them now, and I think it would be a very good thing if we could send them out from the Radio Nations station to all the countries outside Europe. Now, would that present any technical difficulty?
Pas du tout, monsieur.
All right.
C'est entendu.
Every Saturday night, between 11:30 and 12:15, they broadcast a bulletin in English, French, and Spanish. This account of the League's policy and work can be picked up on shortwave sets all over the world. Governments and delegations of the most remote countries are constantly in touch.
Whatever may be the details of the constitution of the League, the really essential thing about it is that it represents the first and only practical measure which has been taken by the human race as a step towards establishing the rule of law in the relations between countries.
The League has now 58 member states, 65 international organizations, 22 accredited ministers. The new building is itself part of the publicity program. A message will go from London to Geneva by ship and train in 22 hours, by aeroplane in 7 hours, by radio in less than 100th of a second.
Radio remains the best means of international communication and the best publicity for international cooperation.
And it's remarkable how even now, long after the days of that terrific tension in the Mediterranean and those fierce attacks on Mr. Eden as though he were the cause of the whole League action, the eyes of everybody here turn always on Great Britain.
The world is hearing of the striving of the League in the cause of peace.